Well, this is part 2 of what we started last week. If you remember last week, I began by highlighting the 2020 goals that you find on the front of your bulletin, the 2020 goals for Grand Bay Baptist Church. Those being individual discipleship pathway developed this year, 6 new community groups formed, 24 Sunday school stories shared, Sunday God stories shared. We've done a lot of that. 2 spiritual formation training courses taught, and 10 pastoral caregivers trained. And I said last week that while COVID-19 has had kind of an adverse effect upon us getting on with these goals earlier in the year, the year is not yet over, and I believe we can still accomplish these things as we move ahead. And then what we did last week was we focused on the 6 community or life groups being formed. And we began talking about that in a general sense. And if you remember, if you don't remember, then I encourage you to go online and listen to that message and be refreshed on that. I think that's the most important message of these 2 was the one last week, not this one. And so I would encourage you, if you missed that or you forgot what was said last week, then you go and listen to that again if you can stand it. And if you remember then, I shared 2 dynamics or 2 realities that I believe are essential if a life group is going to be actually a life-giving group. If it's going to be a group that people actually, that the members of the group actually want to come to, and they don't come just because, it's small group night and we're going to go. These dynamics will sustain the life of that group. Probably sustain it forever if it keeps being refreshed in these dynamics. One, of course, was what? Yeah, a hunger for Jesus. One was a hunger for Jesus and a desire on the part of the members of that group to know Jesus more. And if you remember, we looked at Paul where it says in I can't get my words straight. Peter Reed used to say, I just got my nose fixed and now my tongue won't work. And so, anyway, we looked at Paul in Philippians where he says, I want to know Jesus. He says, I want to know Jesus, and I want to know the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, and I want to become like him in death. And he says, I press on toward that. And we looked at Revelation chapter 2, where it talks about that first love. If that first love of Jesus is part of the DNA of any particular group, or if it's cultivated in that group continually, then that's a solid foundation for the life of that group being sustained. So that was the first thing we looked at. The second dynamic was a missional purpose for that group as a whole. And we looked at the fact that it was when Jesus sent his small group, when he sent his small group of 12 out on a mission, or on the mission, and then he sent the bigger group of 72 out on the same mission, and when they experienced God working through them, then they came back with what? Joy. They came back with joy. Let's do this again. But the point is they came back. So if you want people in a group to keep coming back and keep attending, keep being there, then it's going to happen if you have them engaged in a mission, some specific mission. They see God working through them. That will set your wood on fire more than anything else. Even if your wood's wet, it'll set the wood on fire if you see God working through you. So that's an essential part. So that's the one I want to camp on today. I want to expand on that a little bit. And in particular, I want to expand on it as to how that informs our goal of 6 new life groups being formed here in the Grand Bay Baptist Church. And in the end, I'm going to actually ask you I'm going to challenge you, give you actually 2 challenges. But I'm going to get to that. I have a few things to say. But before I do that, we're going to have a conversation. Don't come yet. I got a lot to say about you. No, not really. I want us to have a conversation with Krista. somewhere around 19, 20 years ago, somewhere around there, Krista was part of a Christian organization called Covenant Players. And with a group of those Covenant Players, she toured North America, presenting Jesus Christ through the medium of drama. That's kind of what it was. So I'm kind of letting the cat out of the bag there for that, but I want her to tell us about that. She has agreed to kind of tell us the story of that this morning a little bit. I have some questions I'm going to ask her on that. She really shouldn't be here today because she has 3 kids in school, and she herself is in school, which all started this week, and she has assignments already and had planned on getting them done today. But then she said, no, I'll come and we can talk about this. And so I'm glad that she has come. And so Krista, if you would come at this point, that would be great. And as she comes, I'm going to give her this microphone. I'll stand over here then. And I would say to you, I have some questions to ask her just to prompt her. And you may, after you hear her sharing, you may have some questions you want to ask her. And so I didn't tell you that part, Krista, did I?
It's okay. Nothing like putting me on the spot.
Yeah, I know. And so I'll give you opportunity for that. So as I say, I've kind of let the cat out of the bag, but I'd like for you just to begin by telling us what the exact mission of the Covenant Players was, maybe how you kind of got involved in it, and then maybe like some of the things that when you would go on tour, when you would be out there on, I'm going to call it on mission, some of the things that the Covenant Players would do, and just kind of give us a feel for that to begin.
Sure. So I joined Covenant Players a long time ago, 21 years ago. In 1999, I was graduating high school in June, and I moved to Southern California in August. I took a Greyhound bus across North America, and I joined this traveling band of gypsies, I guess you could say. We lived in a van, all our possessions were in it, and we used drama to preach the gospel. So I had seen them at a youth conference. And I spoke to them afterwards. I've always been into theater. I was in it from a young age. Always an interest. So anyway, I spoke to them afterwards, and they ended up inviting me to a workshop that they were putting on at Forest Hills Baptist Church. So I went to it, and I just really liked what they did, and I thought this could be a cool adventure. You know, I'm graduating high school. This could really be something I'd like to do. So I had always served in some sort of capacity. I was involved with King's Kids, which was like the kids did this thing, junior high, high school. You would preach the gospel in the summer, these kind of things. So the Lord had always sort of put it on my heart that I really wanted to serve in some way, but I didn't necessarily want to go to college as soon as I graduated high school. So anyway, led to Covenant Players, moved to Southern California, and we train in the summertime, and then we're put on mission. You're put with 4 or 5 other people, and you literally live with them for 5 months. It's like instant family. You don't know them that well, and you just all live together. You travel to your destination in a van, and then you start PRing for play dates. So a lot of us had a calendar that was already set. We would serve nursing homes, churches. We served in the school. It wasn't necessarily a Christian program that was in that capacity in the schools, but we were brought in to do themes. So they would say, could you come in for a week and just speak to our kids about kindness? So we would go in and we would do a program based on that theme, and it was very interactive. So the kids would interact with us, come up on stage. And then we also taught communication workshops, and then when we served in churches, we would serve Sunday morning, Wednesday night, Sunday night, whatever night that they would want to bring us in or day, and they would give us a theme to base our program on, and then we would tailor make our program to fit that theme, and we would serve them in that way. So it was cool.
So as part of the training then, and actually when you were on the road, were there certain things that you were either taught or disciplines that you entered into that helped you as a group to kind of gel and, that sense of family?
Yes.
You probably didn't have that when you started out, but then when you got going, it developed. Yeah.
So instant family is hard, especially with people you don't really know. You're very vulnerable. I really felt in this situation anyway, where you're serving other people, there has to be some sort of trust when you're living with these people. So we always did devotions together every morning. We always worshiped together, prayed together. We had a Sabbath that wasn't necessarily on Sunday because that was our busiest day that we served, but we would pick a day in the week out of our calendar, and we would say, this is a day that we don't have anything planned. So instead of working all day and trying to get programs, we would cold call businesses. We would also drive around and just drop in and say, hey, this is what we do. So instead of doing that, having a work day, we would either decide to do it together as a group, or how's everybody feeling? Do we need some alone time? Do we need some time away from each other? Right. And then you could just kind of go off and do what you needed to do to kind of re-energize. But we always came together in the mornings, always. One of us would lead devotions, and we would always pray together. It was a ministry, even though we did serve in other businesses. It was a ministry. That was our first thing, was bringing the gospel and serving in that capacity and bringing that message. So our first and formal goal was to spread the gospel. So we were a ministry. So we really felt that we needed to be prepared. We needed to be fed too. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you tell us maybe some ways, maybe a couple of ways, I don't know, how you saw God working through you when you would be out on mission, when you'd be serving in churches or in schools, maybe a couple of instances where you really saw God working?
Every day. You had to live by faith and trust that God was going to take care of you, provide housing, provide vehicle repairs. We had a stipend that we were given, but my home church kind of sponsored me. But it was a lot all the time. You were never not depending on God, ever. You are in New Jersey. Our van broke down at 9 o'clock at night on the turnpike. It was crazy. And we just said, what are we going to do? It was the transmission went. We knew right away, because when you reversed or went forward, whatever. I didn't drive in the States for the first little while because it kind of intimidated me. I was 18. Driving on a 4-lane highway was a little bit much for me from New Brunswick, Canada. So, but our van broke down, and I just remember it was 9 o'clock, it was dark, and I was like, well, what are we gonna do? So we started praying, and we had AAA or whatever, CAA, whatever it is, and a tow truck came, and he was like, I don't know if we're going to find anyone at this time. I don't know where you're heading. We were about an hour and a half away from our host that was hosting us for that week. And he just was like, but I'll take you wherever you need to go. And as we got in the tow truck with him, and as we started telling him what we do and sharing with him, it was really cool. It was like God just opened the door. It wasn't necessarily a conversion, but he was like, really? This is what you do? You just travel around? You live out of this van? You stay with people? And you just expect, you depend on the kindness of strangers? And we were like, kind of, yeah, that's what we do, and it's really neat, and God does this for us and that. And he took us to a shop. And he goes, this is my buddy. And you know what? I have a cabin that you guys can stay in tonight we had a place to stay. The guy fixed our transmission, and he was like, no way, I'm not taking any money from you.
Yeah.
And it's like $2,500, and we're like, how are we going to come up with this money, Lord? And it was just really neat. And we saw those kind of provisions all the time. And I served with the ministry for 6 years, and it was like, now when I think back on it and I look back on those times, I think you're just in a constant state of, I almost didn't even doubt it. I just knew that God would do it because he always did. He just always showed up. And it was like, I know you're going to take care of us, always. Yeah. And now being removed from that situation and thinking about it and just thinking, how come I don't still think that, you know? Yeah. Like he just totally took care of us completely. All the time. Yeah. We always had a roof over our head. We always had food. We always had ministry. People were serving us like we were serving them, and it was amazing.
And that's what it did. Like that, it did that kind of thing to your group as a whole in terms of, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all just kind of, yeah. You were just amazed by God every day.
Your own faith, your own journey. I mean, you've talked about that a little bit, but how about your own journey in terms of your own growth? You've talked about that. So what's the lasting effect on that? You talked about, okay, now why am I not trusting God like that now? But that's part of it. Is there anything else in terms of a lasting impact that had on your growth as a believer?
Yeah, for myself, I can never ever kind of, I don't know how to put it. When you, like certain milestones, when I look at my journey as a Christian, and I just think about, God was so very evident, and he still is, but he was so very evident because you were watching things unfold and watching things happen, that how could I ever doubt? It's always there. It is always there. Mm-hmm. I can't ever go to a place where I'm going to just not see it, because I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've lived it, and I can't ever go to a place where I can ever say,
he's not going to do it.
You're not going to do it. Yeah. Because I know he is. Yeah. Because I've lived it, I've seen it.
Mm-hmm. And that would be true, I suspect, of all the members of that troop that you were with.
100%. These are everybody that I toured with in Covenant Players, I'm still close with. They're even though we're all on different continents and we all stay in touch, I would say that they know me better than anybody, really, because of what we lived through and what we grew through as people. You grow together. Right. You're not only growing individually, you're growing together. So as a group, you can just see how we've had to form this bond, and you have to grow in that bond. It can't stay in one place, and everybody brought something different to the table. So it was a whole. It wasn't 4 separate people doing their thing and then coming together for one thing. Like, we really had to work as a whole.
Yeah. See, the point I wanted I want us to see, and one of the points among anything or other things, is this: that kind of growing, that kind of learning, that kind of fellowship, the depth of that kind of fellowship, it was centered around a group that wasn't meeting just for the purpose of having a small group meeting. That group was centered around this mission that they were on. It was because of the mission they were on that all of that stuff developed. And that's why it's such an important thing in your life and a milestone. One of those things, I call them juncture points, because I have a file on my computer with about 11 what I call juncture points, where points where God has done something and it's never the same after that.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of thing that it was. I just have one more question for you. Just 2 days ago, we acknowledged it was the 19th anniversary of 9/11, when the Twin Towers in New York City were destroyed, were attacked, kind of thing. Probably most all of us here know where we were that day when we heard that news. I was at home. I was working on some project for the convention, and my wife called me and said, "Have you seen what's happening in New York?" And I said, "No." She said, "You better turn the television on." And so I turned it on, and that occupied all the rest of my day. Well, Krista was in New York that day with the Covenant players. And can you just tell us about that day?
Sure.
First of all?
Yeah. So I had been placed on the unit for New York City. I toured there for about 2 years, and I was placed on that unit in August of 2001. We went directly to our mission area, and you just kind of start mission. It was New Jersey and New York City. We decided, because I hadn't been to New York before, everyone else on the unit had served that area, that they wanted to show me New York. We were going to have a tourist day. So September 10th, we went to New York City, and we had just been staying across the bridge. And anyway, so we went into the city, and we were tourists. We went all over the city. It was great. We took ferry rides. We went to the Statue of Liberty. We did everything that you would want to do to see the city if you were just visiting quickly, whatever touristy things. And we actually went to Barnes & Noble that was across from the Twin Towers, and we went to the Twin Towers that day. And we went in and did our thing. And then September 11th, sorry, this always makes me really emotional when I talk about it. We woke up to start our day. It was Tuesday. And the person that we were staying with was a pastor of a Methodist church that we were serving. And he came into the office that we were working in, and he was like, "You guys got to stop what you're doing, and you got to come out here, and you got to turn on the television." And anyway, we turned it on, and it was just, of course, chaos, mayhem. We actually had a ministry opportunity in the city that day. We literally could see the Twin Towers across the river. And it's just like, okay, so what does this mean? We're serving in this area until December. This is a major thing. I mean, this changed everybody's life in that area, in the world, really. It was very impactful. It kind of is one of those moments in my lifetime that I think everybody knows where they were. That's a question you ask, you talk about, It was a shatter. It was kind of a crack in my bubble of safety. And we were serving a nursing home that afternoon, and my unit leader, Caleb, and Carrie, they were a couple, they got on the phone right away, and they said, do you still want us to go? We won't come. Like, this is kind of crazy. It was, and they said, no, we want you here. Please come. Please change your theme. Make us laugh. Do anything you possibly can to get the residents' minds off of what's happening right now. They're sitting in front of their televisions, and we need something. We need you to be here. We need you to help us get through this. So we ended up going to that. Well, while we went to that, I mean, as you can imagine, everybody was trying to vacate Manhattan. Everybody was trying to get a hold of loved ones. The cell phone towers were jammed. And I was like, I have to call my parents, because I'm sure they're at home right now panicking. Where's my daughter in all of this? They knew where I was serving. And miraculously, I picked up my cell phone and I called, and it went right through, which was really odd because nobody else could get through. I called my dad at work, and he didn't know what was going on. He was in a meeting. He didn't know that the world had this massive catastrophe going on, and I got through to him, and I said, I'm okay, and he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, Dad, the Twin Towers have been attacked, and it's crazy right now in the world. And so anyway, I was able to get through and tell them, but it really changed our ministry, that tour. Everybody changed their theme. The schools, how do the kids deal with this? Everybody had somebody in that area that that they knew
Right.
that was affected. The pastor we were staying with, it was crazy. That whole week and months after, he had firefighters in the area that were coming and asking him, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with what I've seen or wrap my head around what's going on? And it was crazy. And I will never forget that. And I'm thankful that the Lord used our unit in that time to minister to people and help them in whatever capacity we could understand, I guess.
So just one follow-up question to that. When you actually went that day to the seniors' home or whatever, in terms of you just serving, taking it on, stepping out in faith, in spite of what was going on within you guys.
Yeah, which was hard.
Yeah. How did that impact you? How did that help you to actually go, all right, we need to serve in the midst of this?
It was funny because my unit leader, Caleb, he didn't want to go. He was like, I don't want to go. It was a lot to take in. And I mean, everybody was just in this, it wasn't only panic, you just felt it was emotional.
Right.
And I mean, it's hard to work through your emotions when you're, okay, but we have to do this. So you have to go and do this. And you don't really have a moment to breathe at the moment. You need to go help these people and you need to do this and change your program, which is a lot. With plays and stuff.
Yep.
But when we talk about it, the four of us have talked about it a lot, actually, and every September 11th, there's messages between all of us from that unit.
Right.
We're just like, we're tied together because of it. And Caleb had said, when he talks about it, he's like, I didn't want to on any level be there while that was happening. I wanted to leave, and I remember there was your emotions are so high, so you start kind of, some people take it, you either cry, some people shut down, some people get upset, angry, right? So little things start to agitate you, and it's in the middle of the day, and we're trying to get to the play date, and we can't because there's all these detours, because everything is, we weren't allowed to go on the bridge, we weren't allowed to go this way, we weren't allowed to go that way, because it's all leading into Manhattan. But we did it, and we were able to work through it together. Right. And it was neat because I remember that night we just kind of all sat together and cried and prayed, and it was neat because we could be that way with each other.
Right.
We did feel safe to be that way with each other, and it did change our focus on mission, because we had to change the way that we were serving people and the businesses that we were serving. So it really, I mean, it ministered to us too.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Good. I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
But
thanks for ending on that.
Can you say thank you to Krista for sharing her today? I'm going to give you a hug. Okay. Wasn't supposed to do that. Well, I'm done. I had many more things to say, but I think Krista has said, I think you've got it. I think in terms of what happens in a group, the dynamic that happens in a group when you are on mission together, and it's the mission and being on mission together and dealing with life together that brings a group together, that keeps them together. Like you say, you've been communicating with, you're still a group in that sense, kind of thing. And so that's the only point that I really wanted to make this morning, and I was going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm just going to give you the challenge, and then we're going to go. Well, we're not going to go. We're going to go out and eat. But the challenge is this. I was going to suggest that what we actually need to do in terms of our 2020 goal of forming 6 new fellowship groups or 6 new life groups is that we need to reverse the order of the way that we do things. Because normally if you're going to do, have a small group ministry in the church, here's what you do. You put the strategy in place, and normally the strategy is something like this, that you get your leaders, you train your leaders, you determine a place where you're going to meet, and then you put out the call for people to join that group until you gather the group, and then you meet together. And you meet together and you study the scriptures, you seek to apply the scriptures to your life, you pray with one another, you have good fellowship, you pray for others perhaps. All of that is a part of it, very much a part of it. And then if you ever get to it, which most groups don't, as Dave was saying last week when he shared about his group had to be challenged, well, why don't you go out and do something as a group? And we sometimes don't get to that. So that's normally our strategy, that's the process. What if we just reverse that? What if we just reversed that process, and rather than starting with forming a group, we started with a mission? Start with a mission. There are all kinds of missions that are possible for us here in this community. Start with a mission. This is what we need to do, and form a group around that. So I'm just going to give one example, and that would be, we are close to 2 schools here in this community. The primary school over here, Inglewood School up here. I don't know how many teachers there. Let's say there's 10 to 12 teachers all together in both schools. Well, what about us adopting a mission to those teachers? A ministry to those teachers, and forming a group around that mission to be in touch with those teachers, to encourage them, to go and ask them, what can we do to help? What do you need in your class? We can raise money for this, or we can do that. And yes, and then meet and do small group, but you meet, yes, to study the scriptures, you meet to equip yourself to do that, you meet to pray for one another, you meet to pray for those teachers, you meet to do all the normal things you would do in a small group, but you're meeting, you're gathering around that particular mission. You hear what I'm saying? So here's my challenge to you. I really think, there's 2 challenges, I really think that's one mission we should take on. And I really think, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pray this week, because I really think that there may be someone that God either has already called or will call to gather a group around them and take on that mission. That's what I want you to pray. Here's what I want you to pray. I want you to pray about that, and then I want you to pray, Lord, is that me? Don't worry if it's not. If the Lord wants you to do it, He'll tell you. If He's not telling you, don't try to manufacture it, okay? But say, is that me? And if it is you, then what I want you to do is I want you to call me and tell me this week. And we'll get together and we'll talk about how that might unfold or what it's all about and that kind of thing. I do not want anyone to call me and say, oh, I've been praying and I think that Krista would be a good one to take that on. I'm not going to accept that call, okay? If God is calling you or you think He might be calling you, then I'll answer the phone, okay? So that's challenge number 1. Challenge number 2 is this. Next week I'm going to have a box at the back here, and it's going to be called Opportunities Box. And what I want you to do is also pray this during the week. I want you to pray, Lord, I better write it. I wrote it down, so I better read it here. Where is it? So I get it correct. Lord, what are some specific opportunities? This isn't your prayer. This is the question. What are some specific opportunities or needs that you see in Grand Bay Westfield that could become outreach projects or mission projects for Grand Bay Baptist Church? Let me read it again. What are some specific opportunities or needs that you see in Grand Bay Westfield that could become outreach projects or mission projects for Grand Bay Baptist Church? Now, just think about your community. Think about the needs out there. Think about what you know about the community. And it could be all kinds of things. It could be anything. And what I want you to do with that, if things come to mind, is I want you to write it on a piece of paper. You might just write what it is. Or you might want to write about it, what you're thinking about it. But I want you to write it on a piece of paper, and I want you to bring it next Sunday and put it in that opportunities box. I do not want you to sign it. I want it to be anonymous. Because if I ask you to sign it, you'll sit there and you'll say, well, if I put that down and put my name to it, he's going to ask me to lead it. I'm not going to do that. That'll go to the leadership team or to the deacons, and we will look at that and say, which one do we, what are we going to promote in our church? What are we going to try to form a small group around? What mission are we going to try to form a small group around? That's how we're going to go with that. So don't sign it. I don't want your name on it. Okay? I'm going to send this question out this week for you, just so in an email, so you'll get it and be praying about it. So, can you do that? Do you think that God has missions for small groups here? So you're not going to throw out a mission, to a group of 3,000 people and say, well, yeah, do that. You're not going to do it to 200 people. You're not going to do it to this group and say, well, let's do that. If you want something to be accomplished, you need to take it to an individual and say, you get a group around you to do it, or you get a group around yourself and do it, kind of thing. A working group. Does that make sense to you? Do you want to say now, Malcolm Beckett, you're weird? No, I just encourage you, those two prayers, and be looking at that. The box is going to be back there next week, and I encourage you to come with that. Are you okay? All right. I think the Lord has missions for us here in Grand Bay, and I think he has groups of people that he wants to do things. And so that's how we're going to proceed with that. Amen and amen.